Hey y'all, hope you're doing well today. So, in today's message, I want to share some thoughts around this inspirational quote, right? This is from my Zen book where you have every day there's something you can read, and I've got some pages falling out here. So, but a year of Zen, right? Sayings, parables, meditations, and haiku for 2023. So, in looking at today's date, which is December 2nd, let me share what it says, okay? And this is notated as a Zen saying. It says, "Everything is true, just as it is. Why dislike it? Why hate it?" And it's funny when you come across these sayings, depending on whatever's going on in your life at that time and whatever kind of mood you're in. And it's hard to just always hear something like that and be consistent as far as how it hits you, right? And so today is one of those days for me when I read this. I'm reminded, and I have a lot of, it's ironic because when I opened my Zen book and I saw that quote, it just totally confirmed what I was already going to go with as far as the topic on this video anyway. So that was really crazy. But when I read it, it's the first part of it, everything is true just as it is, relates very much to concepts that we've talked about on this channel before, which is accepting the hard things, getting really real with yourself, coming into the awareness that, a lot of times we tolerate more than we should. We make excuses for things. We ignore red flags. And so it's comes down to true acceptance of all things, as well as non-resistance, right? But then it follows that up with why dislike it and why hate it. If everything is true just as it is, why dislike it and why hate it? Well, because it hurts, because it's hard, because it's not something that we want to accept sometimes. You know what I mean? So, I wonder if you have the same thought about some of these supposedly profound statements where, depending again on your mood and your circumstances, your lens, you're looking at it one way and it's like, that's really profound, and you can make a whole argument in your mind and debate for why that's so profound. And then next week you can look at it and you're like, well, I can tell you why I hate that, why I dislike that, and it's kind of like a joke. And so I just, the truth is we're all human. We're all just trying to figure our way through this grand maze that just feels almost like a big game sometimes. And, it's like when you're trying to, approach every day with your best foot forward and you're an honest person, when you come to the realization that other people are not meeting you there, that other people are not doing the same thing, and that they are in fact playing games that you're unaware of, it's like totally shattering to your paradigms, to your reality. And so I think it's good sometimes when we're, healing and we're learning and growing and we're truly embodying this journey of being a truth seeker. I think it's important just to be honest with each other and just get real and say, you know what? Sometimes it is hard and it's not easy to just accept things. And that's why I'm going to share some information today from this book. And it's not going to be about yoga, the discussion today. What I'm going to share within this book is philosophical concepts. So it can apply to all of us, no matter what your religious beliefs are, if you have them or not. And again, it's not necessarily related to yoga, right? It's not exclusive, I guess you might say, to the concepts of yoga, but it is part of it with regards to the philosophy piece of it. But, it's life is just this grand mystery. And, I definitely think it's honorable to try to know thyself as well as possible so that you can see your shortcomings and you can learn and grow from them and from make sense of all your different experiences here, so that you can be the best person you can possibly be, so that you can heal from old wounds and all that. But the truth of the matter is coming to the acceptance that we are in fact limited as human beings, and there are going to be things that we're just not going to be able to figure out completely. It's just the way it is. So we have to come to a place of acceptance to some degree. And I think that peace is very much contingent on that. And so I'm going to be sharing with you, if you have the book, it's going to be in chapter 8 called The 5 Kleshas. And so I'm going to go ahead and open with my theory, okay, because this is all around the concept of suffering and just how hard life can be sometimes, and especially if you've just come out of a really trying time, or if you're in the middle of it now, whatever it is, to me, it's always been comforting just simply to know that I'm not alone, because depending on your circumstances, sometimes you can feel like you're alone. You're facing hard things alone. And so that's my main goal in sharing everything today with you, is that just to, number one, remind you that you're not alone. And so, and then if you get something further out of the message, then I hope that it benefits you in some additional way. So my theory, after reading through this chapter, is this. And I'm going to position it like a question, okay? What if suffering is unconsciously self-induced to a degree because it serves as a defense mechanism to the terrifying truth of change and impermanence? Right? What if suffering is the refusal to let go of whatever false sense of stability that we've grasped onto, right? In other words, what if it all comes down to, at the bottom layer, an existential problem, okay? And so as we're reading through some of these concepts today, they mentioned this several times, so I just want to bring this to your attention. A lot of these concepts are really at the core of the mechanism of addiction within the psyche, what drives addiction. And so, it's easy to see the manifestation of addiction and draw these hard lines of division between someone who's an alcoholic and someone who's a drug abuser and someone who's a compulsive gambler or whatever it is, when in reality this mechanism is the same among all of the different ways that addiction manifests, including ways that we may be able to relate to, but we haven't previously identified as this same core issue of addiction within our own mind. An addiction to shopping or to social media, of checking to see how many likes we have on a post, or whatever it is. Those are just the first things on the top of my mind. But it's just a really interesting topic to explore, I think. So the chapter opens up by saying this: samsara hala hala. Okay, it says we often chant this before we begin an asana class. Hala hala, and I hope I'm saying that right, refers to the poisonous herb of samsara, which is conditioned existence that keeps the wheel of suffering in motion. It's said in this chant that we have swallowed the poisonous herb of habitual existence, and the path of yoga is using the poison as a means of finding our way back to complete sanity. So what's really interesting to me is I looked up the etymology of this hala hala, which online it said it means black mass or time puzzle. So very much starting to sound mythological at this point, very symbolic. And let me just share with you also. If I can find it. Yeah, so Hala Hala or Kala Kuda is the name of a poison in Hindu mythology. It was created from the ocean of milk when the Devas and Asuras churned it in order to obtain Amrita, the nectar of immortality. So here we're seeing this theme of immortality, okay, which I mentioned before that when I found this right here, this was kind of confirmation of where my mind was already going. That at the core of our suffering is, underneath all these layers of really denial that we're unaware of. It's like we're creating unconsciously these layers of fog, or just many veils, you might say, that are covering over what's at the core of our suffering, which is the fact that it's hard for us to accept the impermanence of this reality. And so, yeah, I thought that was so interesting. It's talking about the nectar of immortality, right? And so let's move forward. I'm going to skip around a little bit here, okay? So it says, it's talking about, the title of this chapter, the 5 kleshas. It says, the 5 factors that help to put the wheel of suffering into motion, they're called the 5 kleshas, are as follows, okay? It lists them out. And you have the 5 Sanskrit words. I believe they're Sanskrit, but I'm just going to read to you the definitions, right? The first one is not seeing things as they are. Not seeing things as they are, okay? Attachment. So we're breaking down the essence of suffering here, okay? That's what we're doing into 5 bullet points, you might say, okay? Not being able or willing to see things as they are. Attachment. Aversion is the third one. The fourth one is the story of I, me, and mine. And the fifth one is the thirst for further existence. Okay, so I wonder if any of that's resonating with you. And so, this is why I like to explore different philosophies and different spiritual belief systems that cross cultural boundaries, because, it just provides us with another lens to come to a place of understanding on these heavy topics such as suffering, where maybe we have a need for that, just to try and, just come to a place of, okay, I understand I'm not going to have it all figured out, but if I can just know enough, then I can let go of some of this anxiety that I carry with me every day, just kind of like a working baseline of getting the gist of what all this stuff's about, So it goes into the concept of clinging, okay, on page 71. And it's relating both attachment and aversion to clinging, calling it an umbrella term, which is interesting. Talking about how, we can have a preference for certain things, which we talked about in a recent video, right? Kind of like expectations that we kind of place from our mind. We just kind of, put them out into this reality, into our current circumstance or whatever it is, environment, atmosphere, and just when things don't go the way that we, hope for them to, then it's like it's creating this anxiety, when if we had just entered the situation without expectations, which I think takes conscious effort, then maybe we wouldn't have been so rattled. Maybe we could have been able to walk in with this foundation of peace and maintained it because we didn't have any particular expectations, right? And then it talks about aversion too, how it's natural for us to have aversion to what is not pleasurable. And so then it goes into talking about how we all create stories. And and how this is I view it like this. It's kind of like the creation of subjective reality from the viewpoint of the only, true lens you have, which is your own. And so a lot of these processes that are discussed throughout this chapter are, in my opinion, automatic and very subtle and kind of behind the scenes, not done consciously, in other words, right? So let me just read to you a little bit about the storytelling aspect, which I just wrote this quick little note I'm going to share with you. Essentially, what we're doing by creating these stories and then looking through them as our lenses every day is we're making everything personal. That's what we're doing. So it says, Asmita, this I maker, as a mechanism that gives rise to the feeling of I, me, and mine, can, for practical purposes, be conceived of as a storyteller. When you contemplate your own thinking process, you may come to notice that almost all your thoughts or stories are about you. And then I wrote no, because I thought, well, first of all, absolute statements are hard. This is kind of close. I mean, it says almost all your thoughts are stories about you, but I'm thinking, no, it's really not true. I don't spend a large portion of my day thinking about myself, at least not consciously, but I do I do think about the big questions a lot, and just reality, but I just wanted to put that out there. It says, most of us go through the day telling ourselves endless stories about ourselves. Our perception in daily life seems to pivot around this ongoing narrative of me. We talk to others about ourselves, and if there's no one around, we talk to ourselves about ourselves and call it thinking. Many scholars translate ahankara as the ego. Freud, for one, defined the ego as that which mediates between conscious and unconscious, the internal and external, personal and social. In his theoretical work, Freud considered the ego as the center of the personality. In yoga psychology, the I maker is a cause of suffering, or a klesha, because it is constantly filtering our experience in a self-centered way. This conception predates Freud's and takes his idea of narcissism much further. It's not so much that we have fallen for our image of ourselves. Rather, we are constantly overlaying each moment with a story of self, preventing a direct experience of reality, creating a case of mistaken identity. Furthermore, compassion, listening, or the ability to take in others is always superseded by the aggressive mechanism of the I maker. And so I found that really interesting. And then it says, we already exist as people in the here and now. I've jumped ahead on page 75, by the way. We already exist as people in the here and now, yet we still try to construct ourselves as selves, quote unquote, in the present moment. And in that, we often end up missing the present moment completely. There is a joke in yoga that asks, if you had to hide the most valuable thing you had, where would you hide it? To which one responds, in the present moment. If you hide something in the present moment, no one will be able to find it. Most of the time, we are not present or engaged with things as they are because we are so caught up in deep grooves of attachment, aversion, and our stories of self. Since we take actions, and then in quote or in parentheses, karma. Since we take actions or karma based on these habituated patterns of attachment and aversion, we reinforce in the mind and body those same patterns. The effects of our actions leave residues in the mind body, and these residues are called samskaras. Samskaras are the psychological and physical grooves that influence the way we perceive each moment of experience based on previous actions. And then it talks about how they condition, our perception, essentially. And how it has a diagram here. I just encourage you to get the book if you have interest. But it just explains this wheel or this cycle, this cyclical nature of suffering. So, but then, of course, it says, conditioning can change, okay? So, on one hand, I see the point in what's being shared here, what's being conveyed. But in another way, it's kind of like, why is any of this bad? And I'll tell you why. it says, the way we perceive each moment of experience is based on previous actions. Well, yeah, exactly. And it's kind of like, as long as we are fighting the way the human mind works naturally, that in itself is going to create suffering. So, on one hand, transcendence, coming to a place of full acceptance of reality, the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything, trying to not be attached to things that are outside of our control, a lot of that's just common sense, and it's just honorable to try to get to that place. If you just want to put it in layman's terms and not make it fancy, But on the other hand, fighting our natural tendencies in all these different ways is resistance. It is resistance. So, there's, on one hand, I can, and I wonder if you're like this, but on one hand, I can find all of the similar threads that are woven throughout the different philosophies and spiritual belief systems, and they seem so similar, just worded differently, essentially. Different language, different labels and terms, or, whatever you want to say there. But on the flip side, there's some big differences, and you have to get to the place where, you see the difference when you have your, what they say, like your nose in the book, and you're just right up close on these concepts, and you're seeing everything at that level of detail. That's when you see everything as unique because you're so focused on it. But when you zoom out, that's when you can see both the similarities between the different approaches in philosophy and religion and spirituality, and you can also see the differences, and there are differences. And so I just wanted to mention that. Then it goes into, on page 76, the psychology of addiction. Okay, it says, even if we are not addicted to a substance, almost everyone is addicted to their stories of self. At the core of any addiction lies the addiction to a story, and I thought that was really interesting. These stories that we treat like reality are illusions that cause suffering. And then let me share this one part here with you. It says, let's use another example. Suppose we were at home alone. After finishing household chores, making a meal, checking email, and engaging in other distractions, we begin to feel lonely. Perhaps this loneliness is accompanied by a feeling of boredom and then sadness. This is probably a common experience for many of us. As the feelings of loneliness and sadness fill our awareness, the mental tendency is to look for a way out of these negative feelings. Instead of allowing these feelings to arise, we turn to the freezer, take out a pint of ice cream, and finish the whole pint faster than we have time to process. If ice cream has never been your treat, then this doesn't resonate. Just meditate on what you turn to avoid loneliness or sadness, right? After finishing the ice cream in a state of dissociation, it's kind of like we just numb out, right? We begin to process a threefold feeling. First, we feel physically terrible for having eaten an entire pint of ice cream. Second, there is usually a degree of shame or self-judgment for having indulged in this reactive pattern. Third, the feelings of sadness and loneliness we try to avoid with the ice cream return again. Freud called this the return of the repressed. So my note just simply says avoidance, right? Or you might say resistance. So, yeah. And then on page 78, let me just note this with you all, and then we'll tie it all together in here in just a minute. So it's talking about, it says yoga asks us to stay with our feelings, right? It asks us to notice what we want to avoid and what methods we use to get away, right? Ideally, it says rather what we want to do is stay patiently in the present moment, accepting whatever is occurring as it arises, unfolds, and passes away. And it explains how we need to feel all of our feelings fully, right? To allow the sensations to come and go. it says the stealing of these fluctuating stories, or this, I would say the stealing of our mind, our monkey mind, is not the goal of yoga, but rather the technique through which we can wake up to a present moment not obscured by self. Okay. And then, of course, it says, like a magnetic force, the habit of orienting our experience around the axiom of I, me, and mine is extremely difficult to do and undo. And then over here on page 80, it says, non-attachment does not mean dissociation. It actually connotes connection and engagement with what is. Non-attachment does not prevent compassion. It sets up the conditions for it. So, and then it goes on from there. It talks about grounding, the ability to stand still in difficulty that makes new ground. And that's kind of what we practice when we do yoga poses, because a lot of them are very difficult. They require strength and balance and stability, and you can start to feel the burn, and you have to hold the pose and breathe through it. So it's kind of like starting with a physical practice of mind over matter, so that you can in fact translate that into an internal philosophy where you're able to tolerate hard times that you don't have control over by turning to your breathing in the moment. So it just gives you that skill set to work with in your life. They call it yoga off the mat. And then on page 83, it says, instead of reacting to feelings, we pay attention to what is occurring in the present moment. In doing so, we take actions that reinforce patterns in the mind-body that create the conditions for being just as present in the next moment. This is true. And this is kind of starting to explain what keeps us stuck in this wheel of suffering, they say, this cycle of suffering, and we don't even realize we're doing it. If we could become conscious of it, which is what this is all about, becoming conscious of our part, of our participation in creating this ongoing, or perpetuating the suffering, right? It's not that it's our fault, but what we can do is recognize our part in it and become conscious of that, right? So that we can choose to let go moment by moment. And in one of my classes, we were just discussing that a lot of this really is a moment by moment kind of thing. It's certainly not a one and done. So, but yeah, that's what we want to do. We want to get to a place where we're taking actions because we're truly paying attention and not reacting to our feelings. We're not attaching to our feelings. We're not judging them. We're allowing them to come and go because it is part of the human design. It's nature to have feelings. And so just to allow them to surface and to even honor them by allowing yourself to sit with them and feel them fully, and not like pretend like you don't want to cry, but instead actually going and crying or whatever you need to do in a healthy way, then they'll pass. And then you have you've allowed it to move through you instead of it moving you because you resisted it. It's almost like, if you think about the pressure of water, and how if you have, say you're in a stream and the current's pretty strong, and you have a paddleboard, for example, and you turn it up on its side and it's resisting the water, well, it's going to build up until it bursts, right? It's going to just blow out of your grasp. But if you turn it this way and you kind of just let it go on down the stream a little bit, well, you're letting it go, and then it's not going to create such a big ordeal. You see what I'm saying? It's like you're just moving with it, which is where we get that whole that saying, be like water, just kind of go with it, and don't attach, don't resist. When we resist, that's what causes the suffering, right? And then as we get into that habit, then we're able to stay more and more present, not just right now, but in the very next moment and the moment after that. And then before you know it, you're actually living your life. See, it's like we think we're living our life until we wake up to the fact that we're we're actually just trying to avoid suffering sometimes, right? Moment by moment. So, it goes on to say, in contemporary neuroscience, this is called neuroplasticity. And so it says we expend so much energy running away from reality. We become fixated on what could have been or what we hope or fear is to come, right? It says, though the mind-body is contracted in states of addiction and delusion, these self-centered and inflexible habitual states are not permanent. A moment of suffering can also reveal a path out of suffering, right? Because we know that hard times can actually gift us with insight. So that's the gift. That's the silver lining, you might say, right? And so it says, it is the very intensity of each one of these clashes, when experienced fully, that pushes us into seeing where the mind is fixated and what it is holding fast to, right? And then it talks about, in some of the diagrams here, how we can learn to stay in a place of awareness because we are not personalizing every moment and every experience with a story of how it fits into, I and me and mine. We're just letting it be, just like the Beatles song, just to let it be, and not attach to it. And so at that point, I love it. Let me just close up wrap up what I'm reading with you all with this. It's talking about, the constraints of a conditioned existence of stress and discontent, right? That's what we're dealing with, essentially. So it says, vidya means, this is on page 93, okay, means being with what is. Vidya means noticing how a thing changes as we observe patiently. Okay, this is where you get the whole saying, be the observer, be the observer. It's kind of an intentional detachment. It's not dissociation in an unhealthy way. It's an intentional, you're taking control and ownership of your psyche, and you're choosing to not latch on to something in the moment, right? You're just observing, to be the observer. When we watch, we see what continues, what is permanent, to whom or what a thing belongs. If the self is a fiction rather than some static and eternal entity, and we can recognize that, then we can begin to embrace it as such, right? And then it says, the poet Wallace Stevens describes this kind of psychological freedom in his work, Adagia, when he writes, the final belief is to believe in a fiction, which you know to be a fiction, there being nothing else. There being nothing else. The exquisite truth is to know that it is a fiction and that you believe in it willingly. The way I see this is acknowledgement that we're never going to have it all figured out, acknowledgement of an objective reality, and acknowledgement that subjective reality is our lens. And the best we can do is to try and refine that to the best of our ability, and then to apply faith, moving forward in what we believe based on, all of our getting of wisdom and understanding, and moving forward from there. There's an element of surrender that's required here. Okay, so it says, our work as yoga practitioners is to breathe our circumstances. Avidya is the mistaken conception that anything can provide permanent satisfaction or ongoing security. And then it says, if we are confined to a representational reality, we are always bound to our theories of reality rather than direct perception through the senses and mind. I'm reminded of where the Bible says, you must become as a fool to learn. It says something like, and I'll drop the verse down in the description, but it says something like, any of those who actually wish to be wise, any people who truly want to be wise, you have to first unlearn. And furthermore than that, you have to, admit, that you don't know anything. You have to become a fool to become wise again, truly wise, And so, that's just a perfect biblical example of the concept of non-attachment and of staying a student of life forever, or a truth seeker, whatever lens you want to use, right? So I'm going to share my notes with you all. It says, I wrote, nothing is permanent. Surrendering to this truth, which is God's design, brings peace. Attachment creates a feeling of permanence, a false sense of security, which we unconsciously strive for through these stories where we are the main character, where we're attaching to everything, right? The world will go on without us one day, right? The quicker we accept that, the sooner we stop deluding ourselves and rest in true peace through our remaining time here on earth. And so I want to share with you this concept here. Love is often associated with, butterflies and unicorns and rainbows and, just glittering happiness, right? When in reality, love manifests through a lot of hard feelings sometimes. And if love, which I sort of say if it's equated to God in the Bible, which it is, and when it says these three things remain, faith, hope, and love, and the greatest of these is love, if you consider the concept that love is all there is, then everything starts to kind of make sense, doesn't it? That everything else that we experience as the opposite of love, or certainly not in alignment with it, is actually just a manifestation of love. But you have to be able to see it that way. For example, you're not going to be angry about anything if there's not some part of you that is attached to a particular outcome. And then when that outcome doesn't happen, you get angry, right? So there's a part of the situation that you love so much, that you're so passionate about, that you want it to turn out a certain way in your expectation, right? So there's an element of love there. There's an element of love in suffering, in sadness, There's an element of love in anxiety, being afraid because you have this attachment to or a love for a particular a person or a situation or an outcome that you're hoping for, and it's passion, and so I just encourage you to kind of sit with that, letting old concepts of love just dissolve, and looking at just how complex love really is, and all that it encompasses, and all the different ways that it manifests. And so when you have people who are seem totally devoid of empathy, people who seem to not have a conscience, such as a narcissistic type person, right? What I think many of us have come to understand is that the reason that they can't love is because they are unwilling to feel all the different ways that love can manifest, right? Such as the suffering part of it, loss, the loss of love, or the anger of love being corrupted in some way, right? And so the problem with this is, like I mentioned before, we have this assumption that all of the bad feelings are separate from love. But if they're not separate from love, then it makes sense that when they try to cut all of the bad feelings off, they're also inadvertently cutting off the ability to love as well. And it just reminded me of a song in Pocahontas, the Disney movie, which is, Colors of the Wind. And it's, can you paint with all the colors of the wind? I just encourage you to read the lyrics because it's closely aligned with this, And I want to mention this too with regards to this song. I've always been intrigued how our many of our ancient cultures truly honored emotions, human emotion, so much so that they centered a lot of their rites and rituals around them. And you know, back in these olden times, you might say, feelings were not frowned upon. They were not shunned. And I feel like because of that, people were able to more fully embrace the human experience because they weren't having their psyche split off and these shadow selves created because there was a part of them that their society considered to be taboo. Everything was accepted, and I think it was just the way of life in those eras had to be totally, totally different. And I feel like it probably made these people a lot stronger. I think that they were able to process a lot of really hard truths. And I think that when we talk about concepts such as being whole or becoming whole, I think that it's extra hard on us these days because our culture is not conducive to that. It's not conducive to that. And so I just want to encourage you that, if you are on this journey of learning and growing and, you just have moments where you're just exhausted and you just feel like, why can't you get there? And maybe you are like some of us who look around and feel like, many people just seem to be heavily asleep. And when I say that, it's not to pass judgment. It's just a simple observation that, people are just caught up, in their 9 to 5 and just totally enmeshed in distractions, never taking the time to consider the big questions. I feel like if any kind of big something were to happen, it would be so foreign to, the modern human mind that it wouldn't even be able to grasp, something right in front of people's own eyes and ears as reality. It would literally be mind-blowing. It would be, it would cause extreme fragmentation and all kind of issues. And so there's consequences. There are consequences to living too comfortably, to not being willing or able to reach a place of peace that also contains the reality of things being uncomfortable or things being hard, And so, and I just want to say, if you're on this journey and you're trying to make this happen and become whole in that way and heal, wounds, you're likely doing it alone. You're likely one of the only ones, if not the only one in your family doing this. You may be breaking generational curses. You may be, in other words, going against the grain and not feel supported during this process. And again, furthermore, our modern culture is certainly not supportive of that. And so, yes, I'm thankful for advancements, but on the flip side, you have to think about the price that's paid and the things that are lost that were not really valued, like myths, and the truths that are actually passed down generation to generation, via storytelling. And so I'm gonna share a little bit of the lyrics here in this song, "Colors of the Wind." It says, you think I'm an ignorant savage. And you've been so many places. I guess it must be so. But still, I cannot see if the savage one is me. How can there be so much that you don't know? You think you own whatever land you land on. The earth is just a dead thing you can claim. But I know every rock and tree and creature has a life, has a spirit, has a name. You think the only people who are people are the people who look and think like you. But if you walk the footsteps of a stranger, you'll learn things you never knew. And then it goes on to say, have you ever heard the wolf cry to the blue corn moon? Or asked the grinning bobcat why he grinned? Can you sing with all the voices of the mountain? Can you paint with all the colors of the wind? And I think that's very representative of our current state. We think we're so advanced, but yet so many of us are suffering. You think about all the people that have been, in war and come home, and just all the people that are on medications, for psychological illness. And so, again, on one hand, it seems like on the surface that we've really come a long way and we're advanced. But on the flip side, I think that there was a lot of value to the old ways. I truly do. And psychological wholeness is extremely important. And it says, at the very end of the song, you can own the earth and still all you'll own is earth until you can paint with all the colors of the wind. So when you're thinking about the concepts of objective reality and subjective reality, the health of our psyche is a big part of that. And I just hope that I have got the wheels turning for you. I certainly don't have all the answers, obviously. But I just like to get you thinking. And I like to let you know that you're not alone. And, we are walking this path together, and I'm very grateful for that. And I don't take a moment for granted. So I thank you for that. And I just hope that you're encouraged and that you stay on your path, and remember that it is a moment by moment process, and it is honorable to have the desire to learn and grow and to take actions that are conducive to that. So thank you so much for coming along to hear the message. I hope that you have a beautiful day, and I'll see you again very soon.